Welcome everyone to Urban Innovate Talks, our webinar series where we explore the topics we care about most at Urban Innovate: transportation, technology, sustainability, and of course, people. Urban Innovate is a strategic consultancy based in San Francisco, helping cities, transit agencies, and mobility providers design inclusive, future-ready mobility systems. You can learn more about our work on our website and follow us, of course, on LinkedIn and YouTube. Today, I'm excited to welcome Marek Vanzura, an expert in autonomous driving technology. I had the pleasure of working with Marek on a large European project that I was coordinating during my time at UITP. And this project was about deploying autonomous vehicles in 15 countries all over Europe. And Marek led the deployment in the Czech Republic, which, by the way, was the first to go live in the country. So big kudos for that, Marek. And since then, Marek has continued to explore the world of AVs, testing various technologies and services around the globe, and sharing his insights through some great LinkedIn posts. So you can also follow Marek on LinkedIn to have more of these insights coming. My goal is really to get a snapshot where we stand today in terms of autonomous vehicles technology and driving behaviors, with really a focus on the vehicle, and we can touch upon the various brands that are out there, but really kind of get a better understanding of what is an AV and what is happening on the market now. And for those of you like me who are super interested in the services that AVs can offer, stay tuned really for the services, because there will be other episodes coming on that matter. And for that, don't forget to follow the channel. But enough of the introduction, let's get into it. Welcome, Marek, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, hello, Henriette. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, would you like to maybe introduce yourself for those who don't know you yet, what you are working on this day, and what's a bit your background?
Okay, yeah, I can try to do that. My name is Marek Vanzura. I'm originally from the Czech Republic. Yes, Henriette already mentioned, worked as the, let's say, the director of autonomous driving research in the Czech Republic. We deployed the first autonomous shuttle in the country. Then I did several similar works in software development company that actually works on autonomous driving. Then I did some research in the United States, and now I'm back in the Czech Republic. And we actually make components for autonomous cars. So that's where I'm right now.
Okay. So, do you want to describe a bit more your company? I would like to, when you say components for autonomous car, what do you mean with that? Or
Yeah, I can look in more into it. Yeah, the company is actually a university spin-off. It started as a research project, and it turned out that the product itself is such a great thing that there are, actually customers for it. So they decided to turn it into a spin-off company. We are called Autonomy, which is short for Automotive Innovation. And the product that we currently provide or offer is so-called the drive-by-wire interface, which is, let's say, a communication gateway between the systems in the car and external systems, such as autonomous driving, stack, and sensors, and all these things. So basically, by using our system, you can communicate with a car and control it however you want. So we're basically allowing you to convert conventional cars into autonomous cars.
wow, okay, interesting. I would love to dig into that more later when we go into the various way a vehicle can be automated, so to say. Is it like purpose built or like this retrofitted aspect? But maybe before that, how would you describe an autonomous vehicle to a 4-year-old?
Oh, that's a challenging question. Yeah, let me do it this way. Basically, everybody knows a regular car, regular vehicle, which means there is this metal box, and a person is sitting inside. And this person is responsible for all the tasks, like looking around the vehicle, checking the surroundings, making sure that they follow the traffic rules and all this stuff. And they're executing, they're pressing the pedal, they're moving the steering wheel, and doing all these sort of things to make sure that they navigate through the world in the vehicle. And the autonomous vehicle is basically the same stuff, but instead of this human being who is sitting inside, there is a computer. And this computer is doing all the same stuff that the human being would do. So it's controlling the steering wheel, pedals, it's checking the surroundings, it's making sure that it won't hit anything, it won't hurt anyone, and it's doing all this stuff by itself.
So that would be kind of like what you just described would be the various components that we have in a AV. Can you elaborate on what is made of? Because here in San Francisco, so Urban Innovate is based in San Francisco, we can see the Waymo on the street, where we see all the sensors, the lidars, etc. But I'm not sure everybody's familiar with the different sensors that are on a vehicle, on the AVs, and also what's behind. It's not only vision, right? There is much more behind AVs. Like, would you mind describing a little bit the different parts?
Absolutely. Yeah, I will probably stick to that metaphor with human beings sitting inside a vehicle because it's probably easier for us to imagine what it takes. So when we take the autonomous vehicle, we have several tasks or several things to figure out to make sure that the car can really work perfectly or can work with no issues. And it means like we have to check the surroundings. We have to have some sensors that will make sure that we see everything around the vehicle. And these sensors might be of several different categories or types. The most common sensors are cameras. We know them from digital cameras. That's basically quite a simple sensor that just detects, the light coming from the world, and it recreates some image from it. So that's the most typical sensor. It's the cheapest one. It's very easy to work with, and there's plenty of these sensors around the car. But it's not the only one, because what we want in these cars is reliability and redundancy. We want to make sure that the vehicle will work under all the different conditions and circumstances. So it means that we need more sensors. We need additional sensors, and in this case, usually what we use is LiDAR. A LiDAR is a so-called laser radar, which is an active sensor that shoots laser beams around it, and it detects the time, how quickly the beam gets back to the sensor, and it calculates the distance and so on. And you can basically recreate a 3D model of the environment around the vehicle. And this sensor has its own advantages, some disadvantages. But when you use one sensor and the other sensor, that you can compensate for shortcomings of each other. So in this case, sometimes, or quite often, we also use different sensors like radar, which radio frequency sensor. So it again has some shortcomings, but it also benefits. But when you put all these sensors together, you can also use ultrasonics for close distance measurements. You can use GPS or GNSS, global navigation systems, for positioning to make sure that the vehicle really knows exactly where it is. You can make it even more precise by using some other devices, and you can also use. It's also a sort of sensor. It's so-called HD map, high definition map, which is basically a model of the environment where the vehicle navigates, and it sort of compares to the map that it has in its memory with the sensor inputs that it gets from all these different sensors like cameras, lidars, radars, etc. So this is the inputs that the vehicle gets in a similar way as we get inputs from our eyes, ears, and so on, and it puts it together. It's called sensor fusion. It basically connects all these different sensor modalities, sensor inputs into one coherent piece, and it has like the representation of the world, and it can basically estimate where it is. It can sort of understand the environment to some degree. And once we get this, we have to process it. It's like when we see the environment with our eyes, our brain processes it in a way that we get some output, we get some decision. We know, okay, we have to press the brake pedal now because we have to stop in front of the other vehicle or traffic light or something like that. So once we get the sensor inputs, there is some processing unit, some very powerful computer that processes all the input data and decides, okay, we have to turn left, we have to turn right, we have to slow down, we can speed up, and so on. So it's like the equivalent of human brain. It's processing data and giving some commands for the vehicle, and the vehicle itself then executes these commands and navigates through the environment. So in the end, we have this vehicle that moves ideally, very smoothly in the traffic. It obeys all the traffic laws, and it behaves like a experienced driver.
Yes, it's a great description, and you touched upon some topics I would like us to dig more because of the map, the HD map. For instance, I think there's some difference also in the market in the different brands how they use these maps, or if they use any of these maps. Um, but when you say the way you describe it, and to make clear to people here that listen to us, is like the vehicle is in a way independent, is not like tele-guided, or I mean, I know the answer, but I would like also to touch this topic of teleoperation. Or, I've heard different views. Maybe people think it's on a rail. It's kind of a virtual rail that the vehicle is following, and we know in the past it was the case, right? Or maybe there is someone behind the scene manipulating the vehicle and teleoperating that. So the most advanced technology that we have now is not the case. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think this is a great point to bring up because there is sometimes a little bit confusion about these things, and because on one hand we have autonomous vehicles, and on the other hand we have teleoperated or remotely controlled vehicles. And in both cases, they can operate without anyone on board. So they might appear as the same category or as the same kind of vehicle, but their functioning is quite fundamentally different because autonomous vehicle, as I described before, is controlled by this, let's say, onboard computer that does all the compute, all the decisions, and sensing, etc. But the remotely controlled or teleoperated vehicle is a vehicle that is similar to like these RC cars that we can have, or RC planes. It's controlled by somebody who is not sitting in the vehicle, but is sitting somewhere else and is using wireless network for controlling the vehicle, for making sure that the vehicle navigates. So it's similarly, there are some usually cameras on this vehicle, and the video picture is transmitted through wireless network to some remote station. And this remote station is equipped with steering wheel, with pedals, basically a recreation of the interior of the car. And this person can control the vehicle and is doing it through wireless network, LTE, 5G, and etc. And it from the outside, the vehicle appears to be the same as autonomous, but actually it's not. So these are two different ways of operating vehicles, but they are significantly different. And there is another thing that's probably worth mentioning, and that's when we talk about autonomous cars, autonomous vehicles, there is sometimes this talk about teleoperation also included in it. But in this case, it's usually not the case of remote driving, but we usually speak about remote assistance or remote assistance probably,
Supervision.
or something like that. But which means it's not direct remote driving, but it's like providing contextual information to the vehicle through commands, let's say, for example, and the vehicle basically receives this information, this command, this contextual information, and it processes it inside the compute and decides how to work with it. So basically, you tell the vehicle, okay, this is this tricky situation. You have to cross the, double yellow line and go around the obstacle, because otherwise you will be stuck there forever. So because the vehicle wouldn't do it by itself, but once the human reasoning provides this information to the vehicle, like this is temporary obstacle and you have to drive around it, the vehicle will do it. But the person is not really driving it. So this is the difference that's important to mention. When we can see the discussions about it in public space, usually these different ways of using teleoperation get confused. It's like, okay, this remote driving or remote assistant, what was that?
Yeah. And I can see how it has huge implication in terms of liability. So if suddenly someone take control of the vehicle, elsewhere, and there is an accident, who is responsible, right? So what I hear mostly from autonomous vehicles operators is they prefer the vehicles to stay in charge all the time. And the human who is in the supervision center side gives like indication to the vehicle and say, if it's safe, cross the yellow, like in US, the central line is like the yellow double line. You're not supposed to cross it, but if you're completely blocked, okay, you should go cross it. But the vehicle will still have to decide if it's safe, if nobody is coming, etc. And I think this is a huge difference, and it will have consequences on this liability.
Absolutely, because the remote driving has this one huge disadvantage, which is latency. The speed that the command travels between the vehicle and the control station. So you usually want to avoid too much latency, but sometimes, you can't really do that because of all the distance and stuff. So if you use the remote driving, you're very prone to having challenges with having lower latency. But if you use remote assistance, then the vehicle does the compute by itself, and it's like everything is real time. Whereas with remote driving, there is always some
little delay.
It's not really real time. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a very important point. And also, to mention that usually maybe we can dig in already into the topic of mapping, because I think it plays a huge role in the driving behaviors of the vehicle, because they do this mapping beforehand, and it enables them already to know where there is a traffic light, where there is a stop sign, a crossing section. So what can you share about your view on like HD mapping, because it's also very expensive to do. So what's your view on that and the challenges, let's say, around all the mapping?
Yeah. I think when we look at these things, we can almost like as always see that there are different camps, of people who believe in something, or they are fans of something, proponents of something, and then proponents of something else. And it's the same with HD maps. We have these camps of people who are saying like HD map is totally necessary. We have to have it because it's critical, and so on. And then we have this other camp that's saying like, yeah, it's too expensive, and really if we want to operate everywhere, it would take
We
forever to
cannot
map.
map the entire world, right? That's what
Exactly.
they would say. Yeah.
Yes. So these are two camps that are sort of fighting with each other for a long time.
What are the pros and cons? What can you summarize what you are hearing?
Yeah, I think it's important to mention here that with autonomous vehicles, we are still in quite an early stage, which means like it's not exact. It's not the product that's finalized. It's still something that's under development, something that is being improved every single day. Therefore, we don't really know the perfect setup, the perfect combination of stuff. And companies are usually experimenting with, okay, let's use this or let's use that and see how it works, how it end up. And usually there's this goal like, okay, let's have the system which is the safest possible with the current available technologies. So we see that usually companies which take this safety aspect really seriously, they try to implement as many technologies or as many sort of things as possible into their system. Therefore, they implement HD maps because it provides another layer of safety. It provides another layer of confidence for the vehicle to operate safely. So I think if we talk about HD maps, one of the main benefits is that they increase safety because they provide another layer of confidence for the vehicle, and it's important. I mean, I can imagine that the vehicle can operate without the map completely, but the problem is that there are many more variables that the vehicle has to take into account and has to calculate what to do about them, and needs to work more. It has to work more to figure out all the situation, all the stuff. So I think the HD map, even though the entry, let's say entry cost is higher, in the end it allows you to operate much more reliably, and it in much easier, I would say. Whereas with no mapping, it's tempting because it's like, okay, we can enter anywhere and we can do it very cheaply. But it might turn out that really operating in some large areas, it's not really that easy for the vehicle if it doesn't have the previous map and so on. So yeah, when I look at the current state of the industry, I can see that the consensus is, okay, let's use HD map because it allows us to operate. It allows us to operate as safely as possible, and over the time, it will be getting probably cheaper and easier to decrease the definition of the map or decrease the coverage and so on. So I think we are progressing towards something.
Yeah,
Slightly.
that's you mentioned the cost, and I know that it's a huge burden for this company doing this mapping beforehand and being able to map really all the aspects of the city, the neighborhood, where they want to deploy. I've heard some companies mentioning that they want to map at the almost at the centimeter level, which I found maybe a bit what you say, like maybe it will not be necessary in the future to be that precise, because I can imagine the computing behind is huge, and yes, the investment that you need. I like that you mentioned as well that it's still not, despite what we could see, and mostly the people living here in San Francisco may think, oh, okay, that's autonomous vehicle technology, it's done. I kind of like that you mentioned, no, there are still aspects, and maybe mainly around the business models, that still is not clear to all the AV providers so far on what they should do, like how much they should do in the entire kind of what we call the autonomous stack, and like on this mapping. So on the mapping, maybe to conclude, and I don't know if you want to share something on this very topic, is that I was wondering, well, I was working in Europe, if there would be a way to create like these digital twins, where you map the cities, but like it's kind of shared, like the city would be the one hosting this digital twins, this mapping. The city could provide the information to AV providers that would like to deploy. And like, it would be like, maybe it's a bit naive, a bit like really very optimistic in the way public-private collaboration could happen. But over time, I lost kind of faith in that it could really happen. And because of the topic of obsolescence and cost for the city would be maybe too big. But like, what's your view on this idea of having a mapping not done by every mobility providers, but like something more central by the city?
I actually encountered here in Europe some ambitions or some plans to actually for cities to do this mapping and provide it to companies. The reasoning behind it was like, okay, we will create this HD map for you, or we will create this digital twin for you, so you can train your models, you can train your vehicles in simulations based on this data we provide you with, and then you can come and the reasoning was like, we want to attract these companies to test in our cities, or we want to attract these companies to even deploy in our cities. So that will be like the added value that the city would provide them to attract them. But yeah, as far as I know, I mean, this didn't really progress very much because, as you said, the cost of making this map and also the cost of maintaining it, because there are so many changes around the city. And if the city decides to provide this thing, they would have to have some dedicated team to maintain, the up-to-date the map and all the stuff around it. It's like maybe once they did some math, like, cost and pros, or, content pros, or, the cost benefit analysis, they figure out like, okay, this is not really something that we can afford, or, would be beneficial in the long run. So I don't think there are cities really doing this, but I may be wrong, but I don't think, it's something that in the end turned out to be something really that makes too much sense for the city.
Since we are talking about cities, I think what would be also interesting to mention now already in our discussion is the topic of connectivity, because there is a level of automation, like everything on the vehicle. And I'm personally very interested on what happened on the vehicle side and how can we have really a level of independence on the vehicle side. But I know that mainly in Europe, by the way, there are discussions around adding a layer of connectivity where the vehicles could interact with the infrastructure, for example. Can you tell us a little bit your view on that matters, and what you think it's still ongoing, or like what aspects are we not considering anymore? So what's your view on the topic of
There are so many things that I'm thinking about right now.
Can make an whole episode just on connectivity, probably.
Well, where to start? Well, connectivity is kind of important because when we talked about this in the beginning, it's like, when we have this remote assistance or remote driving, then it totally, relies on connectivity. Although, when we have autonomous vehicle, usually those developers aim to make the vehicle completely, self-reliant. So the vehicle doesn't really rely on some external help, but actually, it's not possible, or at least, right now. So there's always some corner situation, some small thing that the vehicle cannot figure out and needs some help. And you need connectivity for that, because the vehicle needs to call some operator, remotely get the information back. So this is sort of the important element of having deployment of autonomous vehicles, having some connectivity. But when I look at the current situation, especially here in Europe, I can see that there is a lot of work being done around so-called 5G corridors. It's usually like cross-border highways between countries, and there is this idea that okay, let's put some 5G communication units there so we can communicate vehicles, and this is related to so-called uh, CITS, Cooperative Intelligent Transportation Systems. And it's like usually we don't even need autonomous vehicles for using these things. It's like providing drivers information, providing information to drivers about what's ahead of them. For example, in the winter, you can tell the driver by using this information that or these systems that there is like icing on the road, like 5 kilometers ahead or 5 miles ahead, or there is a crash 15 miles ahead of you. So it's better to just exit the highway and take some detour or something like that. So this is the thing that you always also appreciate, having some connectivity and communication between the vehicle and the infrastructure. So these are the activities that I can
And
think
it could
about.
be in the city as well, right? That
Of
the
course,
city
yeah,
could
yeah.
send information on road constructions or like a demonstration happening somewhere, and the AV providers will know how we avoid this road.
Absolutely. The city is a good example because for what's some use case that's actually quite common, especially in Europe, is exchanging information between emergency vehicles like ambulances, firefighters, police cars, and so on with other vehicles. So, you can know in advance, even before you hear the siren, that there is some ambulance coming and you can, adjust to it. Or there's communication between public transit vehicles, and infrastructure like traffic lights. So the vehicle can get priority on a traffic light. Therefore, it's much smoother ride, much more efficient ride for people in this public transit vehicle. So these are all the examples, not all, but these are some of the examples of how you can utilize communication or connectivity, not just in autonomous vehicles, but basically any vehicle that's
Yeah,
equipped with some
actually,
sort
yeah.
of device.
Yeah. Okay, so it's clear, and I like how you present this aspect that actually all these sensors, all these technologies that are developing, sure, they will be essential for fully autonomous vehicles. And I guess when I say fully autonomous, you see already where I'm heading at. But we have also what we call in the jargon, in the area, lower level of automation, where you still have a driver in the car and a so-called advanced driver assistance system, so-called ADAS, where all these sensors that we have described, or maybe some of them at least, could support a human driver driving the car. So can you explain a bit how you see these two different markets, because they are very different, and what are the main differences, what people should distinguish when we are talking maybe on one side a Tesla versus on the other side a Waymo?
Again, a huge topic. There are so many things to talk about. I think I would probably again use some like example with two different camps. We have one camp, but we can talk about, we have this autonomous vehicle as a holy grail where we want to get. And one camp is like, okay, let's take current vehicles, let's improve their technology, and let's slowly get there through, assisting drivers until we get to the point that the vehicle can drive itself. It's like this evolutionary kind of perspective. But on the other hand, we have this camp like saying, okay, let's skip all the assistance and let's just go into a vehicle that drives completely by itself. It doesn't require any human input, and it's like the fully autonomous car. So these are like different categories. And when we look at the driver assistance systems, it's actually something that is pretty common these days. Almost like, I would say, every modern
Every new
car
car.
new car that's being sold, it has at least one of these systems on board. So, and these systems are not supposed to replace the driver. They are supposed to help him or to assist him with certain driving tasks. So, for example, one good example is cruise control, or adaptive cruise control, which is the system that allows you to move your hand, you move your foot from the pedal, and it keeps the speed for you, and it also keeps the distance from the vehicle in front of you. So it sort of like cruises for you on the highway, and you don't have to care about your feet. Or we have the lane keeping assistance, which means the vehicle basically moves the steering wheel for you according the curvature of the road. It follows the lane markings and so on. So you don't really have to do too much stuff with your hands. But these systems are not really supposed to replace you or to do the work instead of you. They are supposed to make it easier for you to be more relaxed, and yeah, I would say they are more like comfort functions. And yeah, so they always, expect that there will be a human being sitting behind the steering wheel and sort of like, paying attention to the environment around the vehicle, paying attention to all the stuff that's happening there and responding appropriately. So the person is always responsible for the outcome of the vehicle. So if the vehicle makes a mistake, the driver should compensate for it and make sure that there is no, negative outcome that, is undesirable.
Yeah, so back to the liability, right? Back to
Yeah, exactly.
If there is an accident and someone was using too much the cruise control and looking elsewhere, the person would be responsible and not the provider, not the car manufacturer or the sensor manufacturer provider.
Yeah, and that's actually like the how to say it, the drawback of these assistance systems, or the tricky part about it, because if they work too well, then the driver tends to rely on them too much, and it's like, I think it's called like automation complacency. So that you expect the vehicle that it will be able to do it more than it's designed for. You put too much trust into it, and then it leads to bad situations because you just stop paying attention, or you do stuff that you shouldn't do. And that's different from autonomous vehicle, because in autonomous vehicle the default situation is like there is nobody in the vehicle. Therefore, the vehicle is completely capable of doing all the things that it should do. And then there might not even be a steering wheel or pedals or anything like that. So that's the difference between these assistance systems, which still expect you to be there and react, whereas autonomous vehicles, they don't expect you to be there at all.
And another difference I can see between these two paths, what you say, these two camps or these two teams, or I don't know how we call them. First, it's usually like, yeah, very different markets, different players in these areas. One is the view I have, and I would love to hear if you have a similar view. The ADAS, it's still very much towards like private car ownership. So you still own your car, and your car is becoming more and more and more autonomous to this, how you say, the holy grail, like the time where you could just go in your garage, go in your car, push a button, and the car is taking you by itself to your workplace, and you can sleep, you can do whatever in the car, but it's still your car. You are still like kind of responsible for it in a sense. The full autonomous vehicles that we see out there, for me, there is more the concept of fleet and more the concept of like services. That's for me also a very different kind of approach. And if I add a layer on that, one would be maybe that the first one, the private cars, will see mainly on the highway, helping people, like supporting people for this long distance ride, or in congestion, still like highway unidirectional, let's say, a type of driving, whereas the other one is more in a confined area. Do you see that these markets will meet somewhere at some point?
They might, yeah. I think there are at least two reasons for this distinction or the differences. One is cost, because developing ADAS is relatively more affordable or cheaper. Therefore, integrated into vehicle in the private vehicle is cheaper for the manufacturer. Therefore, there is more chance that the end user will buy it. There will be a customer for it. Because autonomous cars are really expensive because of all the sensors and compute and etc. And the second reason is autonomous vehicles are still, as I mentioned, in development stage. They're not final products.
The fully autonomous one.
Yes. So that makes sense that there is a fleet that's owned by the developer, because the developer is continuously working on improving these vehicles. Therefore, they own them, and even though they're available for people to use them for their everyday tasks, they are still being maintained and improved by the developer and manufacturer. Therefore, this is the difference why you can't buy fully autonomous vehicle, because yeah, it's still sort of under development. But you can buy a car that has automated functions, and as you mentioned, can help you with driving on a highway, for example.
Yeah, support that. And I know that there is also like a cost factor, that one market will help the other, because all this ADAS development, since the scaling is huge of private cars, it's millions of cars being sold, there is kind of a sense of this, all the sensors that tend to be very expensive. A few years ago, the cost may drop because of this scaling, which may beneficiate the other team, as we were calling it. But also, what I realized when we're talking now, even more to make more clear, is on one side is really selling a vehicle, the ADAS one, whereas the impression I have with the fully autonomous vehicles is more like selling a driver. So the vision I have about the deployment of Waymo, and I think many people associate Waymo with Robotaxi, with this idea of, or let's say, autonomous Uber or Lyft or whatever TNC you have in your city. I don't see that as as what defines them. For me, what defines Waymo is their driver, their capability to have all this technology and all the understanding on the driving behavior more.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That I mean, this is I would say a good point for comparison of the approach in the US and in Europe, because I can see, when I'm in the US, I like or enjoy taking Ubers, or if I'm just the Waymo price, I always enjoy taking Waymos. But when I think about these things, I usually don't take too many Ubers or taxis in Europe because of the prevalence of public transit. Therefore, I see that like robotaxi concept makes a lot of sense in the US because of how people move around. They mostly move around in their own cars. Therefore, you're providing some uh, like replacement to some degree of their own cars in some areas. Whereas in Europe, I don't really see that need for that as much as in the US. So uh, yeah,
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I see that exactly, and how maybe also comparing to the people from Europe coming in the US will only see Waymo as a robotaxi, so to say. Whereas we could see in the future if maybe the technology will be used for other type of vehicles. And we have now also in San Francisco coming new platform, new form factor, having larger vehicle that maybe in the future can even be shared. But this again, it's going in another area. But so since I mentioned already some names, like in San Francisco, the big one now is Waymo. How do you see the different vehicles and brands on the market? You have tested so many of them, and I'm the first one liking your post and reading them very carefully on LinkedIn, where you describe the different driving style and how it feels, and what you like about the one or the other. So, is there something you want to share with us on where are your hopes and expectations with these various brands, and where you see a bit where the way is going? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, this sort of like my passion for trying out different autonomous vehicles. It initially started as this sort of like, work-related stuff, because, visiting different locations or different developers and seeing what they are working on and trying to see how it performs and how well it works. So it started as this sort of work-related stuff, but over the time I became sort of interested in doing it just for fun. So that's the reason why I'm trying to experience as many of these vehicles as possible. I wouldn't say I tried all of them. I haven't. There's still plenty of them that I am looking forward to be on board, hopefully soon. But yeah, I think the form factor is important there. And as you mentioned, we relate this autonomous driving usually to robotaxis. But what I'm enjoying to see that there is this bigger Zeekr vehicle, is
Hmm.
higher capacity vehicle or more special vehicle. And also what I like to see, for example, the May Mobility company from the US, they've started collaboration with some European bus manufacturer. So, and I think autonomous buses is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing more and more.
Buses,
Especially,
so shuttle buses, or which size do you have in mind?
more like regular size buses.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of autonomous shuttles, to be
Okay.
honest. So,
Tell us more. I want to hear both. What do you like about autonomous buses, and what's the thing with shuttles?
yeah, let's start with the buses. I think the that's probably because where I live, so we have a lot of public transportation, we have a lot of buses, and I see that the automation of buses is just the next step, or is something that would make a lot of sense because there are already people used to using them, and there are people being happy to use them, and they're just so common. And we're also seeing the shortages of drivers, so
Mm-hmm.
that would be quite beneficial thing or quite useful thing to have automated buses. Therefore, we could serve more areas, we could serve them more frequently,
Yeah.
and
Or
it
at
would
night,
just
right? I'm thinking like
yeah
at time where it's difficult, even more difficult to get drivers, or the wages maybe even more impacting the costs. That could be a good complement.
yeah, and because of if they serve cities, they're usually higher demand, so it makes sense to have a large bus instead of 15 robotaxis or 50 robotaxis. So because of all the capacity stuff and so on. So yeah, that's the reason why I think automated or autonomous buses would be a great thing, and I'm a huge fan and proponent of them. On the other hand, I'm not a huge fan of autonomous shuttles, at least in their current form, because I think their main selling point is the futuristic look. It's like, okay, let's design a vehicle
Mm.
which looks futuristic, and it sort of, benefits on, or builds on the fact that it's autonomous. But the performance of these shuttles, I'm just having such a hard time figuring out what's the added value of these things. It's like, once you start researching what are the usual operational conditions or areas, what's the performance of these vehicles, it's usually not really that impressive. It operates like on very fixed small routes, like circular routes around some very isolated places with
Yeah.
very
Or like
low traffic.
campuses, or like
Exactly.
quite of
Yeah.
semi-open areas. Yeah.
Yes, semi-controlled, and the seating capacity is sort of like very low. So you can sit 4 or 5 people there, which is not very different from a passenger car. The other thing is because there is this issue with sudden brakes. They don't allow people to stand there. Therefore, you're
Mm-hmm.
losing some capacity that you are used to having in a public transit vehicle. So yeah, I feel like the main selling point is the looks of these vehicles, but the performance is really underwhelming. And I still haven't seen, well, maybe with one exemption, and that was the V-Ride Robobus from the
Mm-hmm.
Chinese
Yeah, I
company
wanted to get
V-Ride.
there because I tried it in Paris when it was running around Roland Garros, and I kind of liked it. I found the behavior were very nice, and there was more seating space inside. It was a bit bigger, so it's a shuttle, but it's kind of a mix. I would say it's not really these old shuttles that we saw at the very beginning of this topic.
Exactly, and I think the best thing about this is that they're using the autonomous driving stack, and they're taking it from the robotaxis and integrating it into the robobus. So it's like they're making it to work in more challenging situations or conditions, and then moving it into this situation. It's much functional, or it works much better. Whereas with autonomous shuttles, I feel like I don't want to offend anyone, or I don't want to be too rude or something, but I sometimes feel like there is this sort of like laziness behind it. It's like, okay, let's design it in a way that it goes like only 10 miles an hour. It goes on this like,
Mm-hmm.
1 mile long route, and it just goes and goes and goes around with no traffic there. So it's like, yeah, it's like, like low hanging fruit. Let's do it in this way. But there is no ambition to move it forward or further into, more difficult conditions or situations. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is my wrong
Now
assumption, but I feel like
I
it's
can see
more.
that, and maybe a way to put it, so a positive way to put it, I would say maybe they did their job into generating curiosity at least, and attention in this idea that it's not a passenger car that just get like something you like. They brought for me the positive things of this deployment that started actually almost 10 years ago with the shuttles. It's already put a mental model, created a mental model in the head of people that autonomous vehicles should be shared. Like the ride should be shared. And for me, that I really, really appreciate that. I mean, I think it was super important. We did some interview in Singapore about if you think of autonomous mobility, what comes to your mind? And they kind of picture this type of vehicles, which I found it successful in a way to not say, oh yes, of course it's my private car and it drives me everywhere. But like that would be something I think they did a good job, like creating this mental model of shared mobility. But maybe it's time to move on on something often exactly what you say, new form, new technology, and go away from the low-hanging fruits, the way you said it, and these closed areas, etc., and move more towards something very useful for transit and for the people.
Yeah, but this is a great point. I have to say I haven't really considered that it provided this sort of like notion of autonomous vehicle and that is shared. Yeah, I think that is quite significant contribution. Yeah.
I try to be always optimistic about everything I see. So yeah, anything else? Any other brand or development? Because we mentioned so the Wemos, the Space Shuttles, the Rewrite coming, which I found interesting also because they collaborate. There is kind of a partnerships happening in the deployment, at least that I could see in France. And I think there will be more coming. There will be some Chinese company coming in Luxembourg, also in Switzerland, but always very strong in collaboration. And in the US, I think we can also mention that Waymo is collaborating with Uber and with other players really to, like, we can see that there will maybe not be like one player doing it all. I don't know if you want to share something on that and if you have some expectations for the future on how partnerships could look like.
Yeah, I mean, as a proud European, I always, support local companies and local developers to work on these things. So I'm always happy seeing, if there is some company from Europe actually working on these things. And that's also the reason why I joined the company, because we're providing the enable for working on autonomy. So that makes me really happy and proud about the work. And yeah, so I think what we can see these days is like even though the autonomous vehicles are still in the stage that they're not final product, they are still in the developmental stage. They reach some level of maturity that they can operate more or less reliably and safely. Therefore, we have several companies from the US, Waymo, and from China. In this case, this might be WeRide, might be Baidu, or some other ones.
Pony
And they are
AI.
trying, yeah. They are trying to work on. They're trying to sort of establish their presence in other parts of the world. And I can see, as you mentioned, Luxembourg, that here in Europe or in France, I can see that this sort of clash of these, companies from different parts of the world, and they are trying to establish their presence. And I would really love to see more action from actually European companies trying to, push back and see like, oh, this is our territory, and this is where we work, and this is where our vehicles are deployed, and where our
But
vehicles.
that's a very good point that you say. And I think there is a lot of effort also from the European Commission working on like competitiveness of Europe. But then the view I have on that, and please contradict me if you disagree, tell me if you disagree, is like, if the tech doesn't exist in Europe, I prefer to see like foreign tech, and we can develop in Europe other part of the autonomous stack, so to say, because there is not only the driver. We don't only need an autonomous driver. We also need all this supervision center. We need the integration within transit. We need the booking platform. We need to deal with the data privacy. I mean, there's so many things to be done, so many responsibilities around a full service, full autonomous service. I would prefer to see foreign tech included in that, but then we move forward rather than blocking and not dealing with like very, like you say, this tech that is not satisfactory that we had with other company, and that may be even worse because it will also badly influence the market. So how do you see that? Like, where to put the the limit into how free the market should be, and how open should we be to this aspect?
Well, what I definitely say is that when it comes to expertise, talent, capabilities of people, we have that in Europe. It's definitely here. Uh, some what we usually like is like support, and it's support in terms of like regulatory support, like providing conditions that you can actually do these things in public settings. It's the, like, let's say, like technological support, like something that we do and we're trying to do to provide the necessary technology to accelerate, to enable, to make easier for these companies or people who want to work on that, actually with very low entry bar, uh, and support financial. It's like maybe because it hasn't been considered to be such priority, therefore there was not so much money put into it as in comparison with the US or in China, where it was obviously set as a priority. So I think if these three things are sort of increased, then we can develop something quite significant here. And when it comes to using some tech from abroad and trying to build something around it, or maybe yeah, I mean, it's a functional thing, and we can see it in France. They're doing something like this with Chinese. I mean, I'm still slightly hesitant to go in this direction. I feel like I'm more patriotic in this way. I see that we can do something like that with help from the outside. Um, but for example, just a few weeks ago here in the Czech Republic, the first autonomous train was put in regular service. So we have actually quite significant progress and achievements that are ahead of the world, of the rest of the world. But it's not like in the like road autonomy or these sort of
Yeah, yeah.
things. But there are some domains where Europe actually like is leading the way, which is great. But I mean, it will probably end up in some like hybrid sort of end or hybrid situation where we will be incorporating these technologies from the US, from China, and building something around them and making them like localized, making them according to our settings. Because, for example, I would love to see like bus with the Waymo's autonomous
Yeah,
driving stack. That would be
yeah, yeah,
pretty cool,
definitely.
and I think that would be even more interesting for European users than
Hmm.
Robotaxi.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love to see that too. Let's see what's ahead and what new collaboration and how the market will evolve both in US and Europe, where we both uh, worked. So we are approaching the end of this episode. Two questions, a bit kind of challenging, just as a teaser for the end to end. Let's start one a bit more negative and one positive. What could go wrong with AVs? What is the worst scenario you could think of? Speaking of AV, either on the driving behavior or like the evolution of the market, like we can see around the world now, or like we can think about the evolution of the world in a dystopic or utopic way. Let's look at the dystopic way for AVs. What would that be?
Well, at the end of the day, the success of AVs will depend on how people will accept them. So, if people actually don't see them as something that's bringing value to their lives and refuse to use them, then it would be, bad for AVs. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be bad in general, because if people have different preference, then why to force them to use something they don't want? So, but for the AV industry, that would be bad. And yeah, related to that, when it comes to this public trust or interest in these things, I think if there is some bad accident,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like, killing somebody or doing something really bad, then I think that would probably make people less interested or enthusiastic about these things. So it's like very fragile sort of situation. And I think most companies are aware of this. Like, they're walking on very thin ice,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to make sure that they won't screw up. They won't make some bad
Yeah.
thing that would really harm the public.
That's something that I would love to address also in this webinar series, is the topic of why, people, there is a road accident every day on the world, killing people, literally killing people every day in every country around the world. And when there is an accident with an AV, there is such an emotional response to it that I would like to dig to and to speak maybe to some psychologists on what's in our brain that make us so sensitive about that. Whereas when we hear about car accidents, we are very sorry, but we will not think about it very long time. It will not come in the press at all. So there is something spectacular about the machine being responsible for death of human. But like, I think that's another topic. I'll keep that for another time, and you can join again if you want to talk more. But let's say a final positive word about what would be like the perfect development, the perfect, like the utopia, like how would the city or where you live now, how could AV help it make it better in a way? Is there a place for AV in your ideal future?
Yeah, I think this is somehow evident or visible from what I said. I think what I would like to see or enjoy seeing is having more automated or autonomous buses or public transport
Mm-hmm.
vehicles, because I can really see that it would increase the quality of life of a lot of people because of increased service hours, increased frequencies, capacity, etc. So I think that would be really beneficial. So I would like to see this move from small personal passenger cars and turning more into larger vehicles like buses and so on. So this development of automation is something that I think would bring a lot of joy and benefit to a lot of people. And yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying seeing how Waymo is expanding across the US and now even into like Japan and these places. So I think if they continue doing what they're doing, what they have been doing so far, that would be great. And I think they're on the right track, on the right direction. So yeah, I think the future is bright in this sense.
Nice. That's a perfect way to end the discussion. Unless you want to add something on this topic, something that the public should know around AVs, or we end up with this bright future that may come.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would like to add is that if you have the chance to use this car or to try it out, then do it, because there is nothing better than the real world personal experience with these things, hands-on experience. Because if I look around myself, there is like still 99% of people around me, they're not aware of this, such a thing exists. So if you can do it, if you can take a ride, 2, 3, and see for yourself, then I cannot recommend it enough. It's really the best way how to get, obtain some knowledge about these things and see how you feel about these things. And that's something that we should promote.
Yeah. That's a good point. And yeah, there are more and more, depending the listeners, we don't know where they live, but like depending where they live, should see, or maybe on vacations, you can go
Yeah.
try an AV. It's worth doing. I guess you and me, it's what we are doing, right? Because when I tried the one in Paris, I was actually visiting a friend and I heard about Roland Garros deployment and I just do it on my vacation time. So kind of have this habit as well. Thank you so much, Marek. It was a fantastic exchange. And I would say everybody stay tuned on the channel, for there will be more topic coming around automation, about autonomous vehicles, but Urban Innovate Talks is beyond that. It will address mobility in a wider sense. So stay tuned and we will continue the discussion. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you.